Yay! Hi! This is actually my first time ever using my iPad to go live, so it feels really weird, but we're doing it. Hello. This is December's Shelf This Book Club discussion of The Anomaly by, can I say it correctly? Hervé Tellier. That's how I always think it should be. What are you say it?
How would I pronounce that?
That's how I always think it should be.
Hervé Le Tellier.
Oh no. Okay.
Because
Yay.
the E at the end of the Hervé has an accent.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
For being here and knowing things better than me. Which was the book that Martine picked for this month for us to read. It's like a sci-fi situation. Do we want to give like a full synopsis of the book? I feel like when I synopsized the book anytime, like my announcement and stuff, I did poorly. And now that I've read it, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, it's hard because what you need to know about the synopsis, like, spoils the first third of the book, which I found interesting.
I had forgotten the synopsis though, so when I went into it, it still felt like I was blind. But then it happened, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I knew that was like gonna be part of."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so it's about this plane full of people who accidentally have doppelgangers now because the plane landed and then it landed again like 3 months later with all the same people on board.
Yes. Very interesting premise, I thought.
Yeah.
Once I actually knew that that's what it was. Okay, we have friends here. This explained by, hi Ruby. So glad to have you here. And this is exactly what I said backstage before we came on. Lizzie said she never knew the synopsis. We just have full trust in Martine. Elsa's here. Hello. And Ruby also never knew the synopsis. So that is kind of the best way. But I think just the concept of being able to say the word like clones would have helped a little when I was trying to describe this in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than doppelganger.
Yeah, because
to me, doppelganger is just like someone who looks like you, not is you.
Yeah, well, it's hard because I don't even think clone is the right word because scientifically, you're gonna hate me. Scientifically, if you clone somebody, you take their exact DNA, you grow somebody new out of it. That's still a whole different person.
Right. Different experiences, different memories, different. Right.
But like,
that's not what's happening.
In terms of a literary character clone, yes, sure. That's the situation.
Yeah, I feel like we should say ratings because that's what we do here. I have no idea what anyone rated it because I haven't like lurked Goodreads lately either. So absolutely no clue. I'm very excited. Will you tell me what you rated it?
Yeah, I gave it 4 stars.
Okay. Good job. Good job being the picker and liking the book. I feel like I'll have to explain my rating a little bit, but I actually gave it 4.5. So I rated it pretty high.
This is the first time when I've picked that you've enjoyed it.
And I've never, well, I like Digging the Magic. I was going to say I've never enjoyed it when I've picked it. So just the basis of why I'm going to say that might be inflated a little bit is because I have not finished and liked a book in a while. So even the fact that I read through this quickly, liked it, and yeah, probably inflated my rating a little bit. Ooh. Lizzie gave it 3.5. Okay. Ruby gave it 5. Wow. And we'll have to convince Elsa to give it a 4 by discussing it. I mean, yeah, where to start? Because I always feel like even when I want to talk positively about books, I only have like lean towards starting with negative thoughts.
Yeah. My thing is, like, it's hard for me to explain why this lost a star because there was a large chunk of it where I was considering giving it like 4.5 or 5 stars. But then ultimately it didn't land in the way that I wanted it to. I'm totally fine with how ambiguous the ending is. I actually prefer that because, like, in this case, I feel like any other answer would have been disappointing.
Yeah. To me, like, the negative that I guess I would want to lead with would just be that I wanted more.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like we could have used, if they were going to have the before where we're like kind of learning about all the characters, I could have used a little bit more of that.
Follow.
Otherwise, just like get rid of it. And on the same side, like at the end, I could have used a little more of like what happened after, but just the intrigue in general for me was so high that it was like, okay.
Yeah, the intrigue was so high. I loved the writing style. The characters were all fascinating to me, which I really like. Like, this was less about the like sci-fi element about it and more about like, let me write 11 characters and have you read all of them and then say like, who would ever write a book where you have to follow 11 characters?
Actually, my book comparison to this, I'm pretty sure you've read this book, that the whole time I couldn't help but think like, oh, this is similar to that. And not exactly, is The One by John Mars.
I haven't read it yet.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you have to,
I know.
because I'm sorry, I love this book, but that is like this book times 10. Like, I love that book so much. So, yeah. But it's the same thing where you're just following like an absurd amount of characters through like a sci-fi type situation.
And I was so dedicated to figuring out what happened in this that I actually took notes when we first met the characters. So I have like these notes when I met them. Some of them are more helpful than others. Like Blake's just says hitman.
Perfect.
But then others like David, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, some man came and took a swab from his dying body.
I actually, yeah, I feel like I didn't remember them all, and that it, in the end, I didn't really feel like that mattered. Like that wasn't the point, I guess.
No, it
Because
wasn't.
again, like, why were we following so many if the characters weren't going to matter, and also where I wanted like more from them would
Yeah.
be to have had that connection with the characters.
If I had not taken notes, I promise it would have mattered.
Yeah, and that's what. Did you read before or after Ruby? Because she also made a comment that was like, I kind of think it might have been a good idea to take to like
Yeah,
know who
I
was
read
who.
after Ruby, so
Okay.
I used that advice. Like, I read the first
Right.
chapter and I was like, "Oh, I think I'll be good." And then I realized how many chapters had different names heading them, and I was like,
Okay, maybe I did read that.
yeah. So, and I
Okay.
do think it helped because I referenced it a couple of times when I read it.
To me, I'm just someone where like if it doesn't make sense as I go, then that's not a book I like.
Yeah.
Like if I have to take notes for it to make sense, I don't want it.
I usually feel the same way, but again, I was just so into this story and the writing style that it was like worth it to
Yes,
me.
that's fair.
So,
I did also really like the writing style. It is thriller-esque, know what I mean? Like with
yeah.
it's suspenseful. So I kind of missed that.
I also just loved so one of the characters is a translator in this, and so I thought it was hilarious that it's a translated work.
Yeah.
And when they were talking about how much skill it takes to translate, I was like, this translator sitting here
Right.
typing in there.
Translators are the best thing in the whole world.
Yeah.
I also do always wonder like how much the book seeming well written in a translated work is like was it written like the same way in the original language, or like did the translator do like such an amazing job with the writing? I always wonder that.
Yeah, I mean, generally from what I know about translation, they read the writing style and they try to figure out how to make that same impact in the
Right.
second language.
Right.
So I think it probably read pretty similarly in that way, but you can never really tell, I guess.
Like if you translate something that's like overly descriptive, you're also going to have overly descriptive, but
Right.
it sounds like Mabel's getting scolded. I'm so sorry. Okay, let's catch up. I really like part 2, but I thought part 1 was confusing and part 3 fell off a little. That's also how I felt, but I think maybe
I really liked part 1 because, one, the intrigue was high. I was like, why are we meeting these people? Why are FBI agents arriving? And I really liked each of the characters. So, like, every time I read a character, I was like, ooh, that's an interesting character. And then I'd start the next chapter. Ooh, that's an interesting character. So.
I will say and this is obviously purposeful, the most interesting to me was when the last chapter before we switched to part 2,
Mhm.
when he all of a sudden gets the call that he has to leave when he's on that date.
Yes.
And then they're like, the phone has never rang.
Yeah. No, I loved that. I was like, what?
And then you like get to what's happening and you're like, that's when I was like, oh yeah, that's the synopsis of this book. So there was just a lot happening in that like 2-chapter span that I was like,
Yeah.
when I honestly couldn't pinpoint when this first happened, like who broke out. I was like, who broke out? And then obviously it clicked. When Blake broke out of the hangar, I was like, OMG, Blake!
Blake! The very first character we read from.
Yeah. The jump scare of like meeting themselves? What jump scare are we referring to? Is that what you would also think? Can you imagine meeting yourself?
Me has a twin.
No, but like it's different.
It is different.
They make a point in the book that it's different even. Also, when I was reading the part where they were talking about like how twins are viewed in whatever country they were talking about, and they were like they had to kill one, I was like, oh no. Content warning, Martine.
Yeah.
I don't know what I said, but thanks for agreeing with me. Yes, very interesting. Very is the word I would be looking for. Meta? Is that the correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. The most I'm doing is if I'm reading a ebook, I will highlight.
I literally only took notes because Ruby, after she finished reading it, said she wished she had, so.
Martine, do I need to remove my Jack title so that you can have it? Because you take notes more than anyone I know.
Just saying.
Yeah, I was actually really thinking about that because I was like, wait, isn't this translated? So isn't the author not like from the United States?
That reminds me that my favorite chapter, I think, was the one that opened, and you know how each chapter said like when it was and where it was? Okay, so it says Ed Sullivan Theater, and I go, that's where the Late Show is. Why are they at the Ed Sullivan Theater? And then it was the Late Show, and I was
literally
like, oh my God. So I looked at my dad and I go, they're on the Late Show right now with Stephen Colbert. That was so funny.
They literally were. It is. What year did this book come out? It was like 21?
Something like that, yeah.
I mean, I just typed it in my spreadsheet like yesterday. Oh, yeah. Yep. Funny how that works, how they bring them all back. Funny how they all ended up being important. Oh, yeah, because at the time...
Well, there was kind of a... There was like a... It was a mixed message. So technically, if it was pubbed in 21, then it would have been written before 21. So it still would have been Trump. And they
we know. We can say it. We know.
They did at one point say that the president was making a mess over on Twitter. So I think they didn't want to name him because they wanted to have more control over what that character did in the story. And
right. But I also like naming that in a book, even though it says like the dates, does date a story regardless.
But I do feel like the one thing, the comment they made about Twitter was like a call out to be like,
oh yeah. But this also is interesting because if it was written before the author, there was no way for them to know if Trump was going to get a second term or if we would have a different president. Yeah. So it was the assumption that it was still going to be, know what I mean? By them nodding that he was still existing in. Yeah,
but then maybe by like not explicitly naming him, we're like, just in case.
Yeah. Since it said it was 2020. But yeah, you're right. We wouldn't have known it was Biden yet. Yeah. I didn't catch it because I'm bad and don't know who that is. I'm so sorry.
It's the French president.
I'm so happy for him, I guess. Congrats on your presidency.
I cannot. Did you have a favorite character?
Let me think. not that it was like a good perspective, but I liked the little girl.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was a very interesting thing happening.
Yeah.
Horrifying, but I actually wanted you to talk to you about that because that's kind of what you study, yes? Children's psychology?
Yeah. Yeah.
Opinion on how they handled that?
Oh, sorry. I was like, what are you talking about? And then I remembered the chapter because I was sitting there reading that chapter, and I've actually written an entire section of a like chapter
Mm-hmm.
about delays in disclosure for childhood abuse. And so it was a really, I thought it was fascinating because I thought they did a really great job of depicting the conversation that a child would have in their own head with themselves
Yeah,
about a situation.
them talking to each other was just like they like them realizing like the secret that I'm not allowed to tell anybody
Mm-hmm.
was crazy.
And I feel like it is very much the case that kids who go through those situations often have a push and a pull of we should tell, we're not going to tell, we're not going to tell. And we saw that outside of themselves, which was interesting.
Yeah. So that was a very interesting perspective to me.
Yeah.
It's out in my mind.
I also just was interested to read that scene because I've like studied different interviewing techniques for children in those situations. And so, I mean, I thought they handled it well. Like they depicted it well, but it was just interesting for me to read. I had totally forgotten about that.
Yeah. I was thinking of you. There were many things in this book that made me think of you.
Yeah. My FBI agent was working top notch.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly how that played out, so. And I agree with this based on just like, again, the hints that were said.
The goofiness.
Yeah. Yeah. Did any other perspectives?
Oh yeah.
Did else have comments on their favorite people and perspectives?
I
Obviously the guy that had like died since.
Yeah, Victor.
Yeah.
Who wrote the book, The Anomaly. Yeah. That was interesting. And I also, another like kind of too late thing that I really found interesting was David, the one who had stage 4 cancer. And then like by the time his new self came, they were like, we still can't save you.
Right. Like it would not have been enough time.
And so like his wife and his kids had to go through all that like a second time.
Because I think in the original he was like, if I would have came a couple months ago, would it have been soon enough? And then it was like proven like, no, it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. That was rough.
Yeah. I do feel like in this case where there are these characters that like most of the time you do find more interest in some than others.
Mm-hmm.
Like the two girls who ended up on the one girl that are now two who ended up on Stephen Colbert. Like I didn't really find them that interesting.
Well, that was the only chapter about those two.
Right.
Like they weren't one of the characters that we were actually following.
Yeah.
Which I thought was an interesting choice. But they would have made fun of him differently.
The scientist with the phone I liked.
Yeah. I liked all of the like mathematicians and physicists sitting around being like, ah.
I did think it was interesting like who they all brought to like ask like what is happening.
Yeah.
And the like theories that they thought of were all like, in my opinion, all valid and interesting. And then the fact that they brought like religious people to say like basically the value of these new humans, but then also the concept of like who is the original and who is the duplicate.
Yeah, and then when they were all dealing with towards the end how they were going to split up their shared lives.
Oh yeah.
Custody of kids, money,
yeah.
like, living, identities.
Well, right. Because there was one like, am I stealing their retirement?
Yeah.
But obviously I think that's why I can't think of their names. The mother-son that like one of them, like the son wasn't on the plane, so one of them had the son and one did not. Like
Yeah.
the shared custody situation was like,
that was wacky.
yeah.
But I was like, I'm so glad they put this perspective in because I think this is one of the interesting outcomes possible in this scenario, and I would have never thought of it.
Yeah. Because there was another one that had the opposite where like both parent and child were on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's 2 of each. So like, do you each just get to keep one? Where this one, it was like, you can't say that I no longer have a son.
Yeah.
Like, you have to let me see my son.
Right. No, that was wacky. What else was wacky? Oh, Blake confronting himself the way he did. That was wacky.
I don't remember.
He captured his other self and he
Oh yeah. Yep.
yeah. Did all the things. Killed him. Dead.
Yeah. I do think this is interesting.
I also like what?
I said, as I already said, I thought the religious deities was interesting.
I definitely liked the religious leaders chapter because one of the things I like most in sci-fi books is when they have theological discussions. So I was like, oh he. And I definitely like highlighted some quotes there. So and I wasn't like necessarily expecting that. Like there are some books that you go in and you like expect them to have certain kinds of discussions, but going into this, I would have anticipated a lot of the other discussions, like with the physicists and the mathematicians, but I didn't even think about some of the conversations that they had from a theological perspective.
But I do think that like makes sense, and that's probably realistically how something like this would be handled. That like it seemed like, yeah, you would have to do that.
Yeah. One thing that I loved about what was his name? Adrian, the statistician who got the phone call, was like how they depicted that they made all of these different protocols, and then they were like, well, what if it's not one of those? And they were like, haha, that's so stupid, I guess. Call us. And then they get the call. It's like, you mean it's not an alien, it's not this, it's not all these crazy things, it's something else. I also thought it was interesting in the beginning that we were going back and forth between the perspective in the plane of the second plane, but then also the like older like the March people, but the June plane. Because at first you were kind of led to believe it was the same, like I don't know, like you just weren't led to believe. I don't know. It was just shocking.
I know what you're trying to explain. I'd love to help you.
Yeah. It was just shocking to me when it was like all these things were happening and then this plane lands down. All these same people are in the plane.
Well, and they realized pretty quickly, like obviously before they landed, that something weird was happening because they told them to land somewhere else.
Yeah.
So like they instantly knew like something is not right here.
Yeah. And then like, oh, when we find out that China had been like hiding a doppelganger plane.
Yeah, that there had been more.
Yeah, there have been more. And then of course, am I misremembering at the end, didn't like a third plane come?
Yeah. So at the end, they like basically I'm pretty sure it was the president decides like basically to hide that plane, and it says like we can't keep letting the same plane land.
Yeah. And I was like, what the heck?
Yeah. What
happened to you Christmas?
Let's elaborate. This did not happen to you this Christmas.
I know you had plane troubles this Christmas, but
not that. Not like this.
That would have been wacky. Imagine.
The plane landing in the wrong place.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think this is a book that's like hard for me to discuss because it just had like so many ideas in it. But I also think for how complex it was, it read so easily.
I agree.
Which I really, really appreciated.
Come back to that point that I made of like usually when there's so many perspectives, like you favor some. It is like, yeah, there were some that I did like more, but I was never reading a perspective and was like, oh, let's move on from this one. Because they like long enough to get bored of, I guess.
They were all interesting characters and like, I don't know, I feel like every part of it was interesting. Just in the end, it wasn't quite enough for me.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. Like, would I have rather had more of the before, or would I have rather had more of the after?
yeah, I mean, it's hard for me because I feel like if I could have had something changed about this to make it a 5-star, what would it even be? Like, what would I want changed? And I can't.
Yeah. Like, overall, I just want more, but I also am not someone who would have liked to read a book like this that was longer. So it's
Yeah.
like, this was fine. This was close to perfect, I guess. Because the same thing of, like, I would have liked more of each of the people confronting themselves, like when they first met themselves. I don't
Right.
know that. Each other, themselves, whatever. Like, would have liked to see more of those. Oh, my baby's crying. More of those meetings.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like, at some point, it's like I can't sit through any more of this. It'll stop eventually.
Yeah.
This is what happened to Lizzie. Yeah. I think that's also back to the point Ruby made of, like, maybe I should have taken notes. Because, like, the more you know those people, the more their reactions make sense.
Yeah. I do also think, though, it was really cool to, like, read them, and then, like, you get this second plane full of people, and you know what has happened and is happening in these people's lives that these June versions of themselves are not privy to.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my god.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because the girl that ended up on the Stephen Colbert show had gotten a boyfriend since then.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
Yeah.
I felt like just the right amount of before and during and after. I really stand by my no note stance. Yeah, like, more would have been too much.
Yeah.
The book would have been too long. It would have been too much.
And again, I was worried that they would say something definitive about what had happened and then I wouldn't be satisfied with it,
Yeah.
but they didn't. And yet
Yeah.
it also doesn't feel like a cop-out. Like, I felt like they handled it interestingly enough.
I can hear my one moment. Okay.
Chris sounds like he just met other Chris.
I think, yeah. I think the baby did a spit up. When I said what happened, he said, I'm soaked. So.
Poor guy. Yeah. I don't know. Those are my thoughts on the book. I really, really liked it. Like, I really liked it. And I would want to read more from this author in the future. And I would be interested. It would be a really hard book for me to read in French just because of the, like, topic. There would be a lot of vocab that I don't know, but I would love to give it a try at some point and, like, see how the experience feels from there. Yeah. Because I did keep forgetting that it was written by a French person, and I do think that changed some of the perspectives a bit. Like, thinking, again, how somebody said it was interesting to read somebody foreign talking about US politics.
Yeah.
Like, I think sometimes I was viewing it from an American perspective.
Right.
And it's like, it's different.
That's
from
not.
Yeah.
Yes, overall, very interesting. Chris just came up here. He's looking at me covered in baby puke. He looks disappointed.
Oh. Parenthood's a joy.
Okay. Well, yeah, I really like this one.
Yeah.
I think that you need to read the one.
Yes. I mean, it's been on my list forever.
Direct recommendation.
Just
remember, Chris read that book.
Yes, I do remember.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell them about next month?
I didn't prepare for that before this, but yeah. Next month, Elsa, who is here, picked the book for January. That's the month we're in, correct? And it is Looking for Jane by... I have no idea.
I forget the title. I just put it in my spreadsheet this morning, but I forget the title, the author's name.
And I just said how slow Goodreads has been. It is, but it was nominated for Goodreads Choice, which Elsa had picked it before, and then when I saw
Heather Marshall.
Yes, Heather Marshall. Looks like this. Where's the camera on this? It's a historical story about women's rights.
Yes, lots and lots and lots of content warnings.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Martine said one today that I listed in like the chat that you can access before.
Yeah,
so
but even I didn't include the like general content warnings. There are some that you'll know from reading the synopsis of this. Like read the synopsis. Don't be like me who doesn't read synopses and just walks in.
This is probably one to read the synopsis on. I'm descending into chaos, so we shall move on.
Did you see Ruby's comment?
She's wrong. Good talk. Okay, yeah, this was December, successful month. If it's not over, oh, how did that happen?
I don't know. Is that because I gave a thumbs up?
No.
Do 2 thumbs up where it can see both.
How do you do that?
Maybe it's because it's my computer. I don't know. That was.
I can't. I don't know. It only works for you.
It's not even working now. There it goes. I was literally about to say Happy New Year too, so that's really
okay. Successful one. If it's not already, I'll add it to that spreadsheet that Miss Lizzie has so nicely made for us to track all of the shelf this books and what everyone rated it and the average rating through everybody. And yeah, it's a good, fun, fresh time. And so till next month, we did agree that the January book discussion will not be until after Squash That Series so that nobody has to worry about trying to read it during Squash It series. They'll have like a week between Squash It series and when we discuss that book.
And I finished it today, so
it will be discussed in February. Yeah. Okay. Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.